I work at the University of New Hampshire, where among my other responsibilities, I'm part of a research group called Prevention Innovations. Our primary mission is to create and evaluate tools that help with the prevention of sexual violence, relationship violence, and stalking. Currently, there are 20 researchers and practitioners that are part of Prevention Innovations, and of the 20, I'm the only one who identifies as male. 2 or 3 times a year, I attend national conferences related to this topic, and the gender split at these conferences is similarly skewed. There have been some remarkably important contributions in the field in recent years that have come from men, but the majority of researchers, practitioners, and policy experts working to address this issue are women. As a man working in this field, I take it as a given that I will be in the minority. But when we compare this to other issues of social concern, we can see how unique this is. There are very few other problems like this that are being tackled almost entirely by people of one gender. Just think of a few examples: homelessness, drug addiction, climate change, poverty, racial injustice. The list could go on, and we'd have a difficult time finding one that is being addressed by entirely men or entirely women. So how did it come to be that women are and have been doing the overwhelming majority of the work in this field? Why do women seem so much more passionate about working to end relationship violence and sexual violence? And lastly, how do we get more men involved in this important fight? I will do my best towards the end of my talk to try to answer this question. But first, I'll try to answer a question that I've been asked countless times. How do you get involved in a field that focuses on the prevention of violence against women? When I began my graduate training in clinical psychology, I knew I wanted to be a psychotherapist, but I was uncertain of a specific focus and not sure with which types of clients I wanted to work. My graduate program prided itself in providing a generalist education, where students were encouraged to try a variety of different things. So I took the sage advice of being open to a whole variety of clinical experiences. So in my 4 years as a graduate student, and then in my first 2 years as a young professional, I spent time doing clinical work in 2 college counseling centers, 2 community mental health centers, a state hospital, and the mental health unit of a maximum security prison. It was about halfway through this process that I started to notice a common theme among many of my clients, especially the women with whom I worked. I was consistently surprised and saddened by the number of my clients who had a history of sexual trauma. I want to make it clear this was not the case for all of my clients, or maybe even the majority. And I had a number of male clients with similar life experiences. But it definitely was a consistent theme. Regardless of where I worked or what my clients looked like, so many of them were living with instances or multiple instances of prior victimization. Sometimes this came in the form of a current abusive relationship that they were trying to flee. Sometimes it came in memories of a childhood marred with years of sexual abuse. At some of the places I worked, it was almost taken as a given that a client would have such a history. A client without a history of abuse was the exception that proved the rule. Even as somebody who was educated and aware of the cited prevalence rates, I was still surprised how much an abuse history was a unifying theme among my therapy clients. Therapists are trained to listen to their clients, and if they listen carefully and without judgment, they eventually develop a deep sense of empathy. This comes more easily and more quickly for some clients than it does for others. But I personally never struggled to find empathy for my clients who were survivors of sexual violence or relationship violence. And as it often happens, as my empathy for individual clients began to grow, I developed a deeper compassion for other people who may be going through something similar. And I began to ask, who else may be going through this? Do I know people in my own life who may be silently struggling with their own story of survival? It was around this time that I made a more conscious decision to be a vocal advocate and ally to the cause of the prevention of violence against women. I started to pay more attention to how I talked about these issues when they came up. I became more conscientious of my own personal history of male privilege, and I became more aware of how I was coming across to other people. it was important for me that the people in my life knew that this was something that I cared about and that I took seriously. Shortly after I became more vigilant about this, something interesting began to happen. Various women that I know began to share with me their own personal experiences of abuse and assault. Someone shared with me a story of sexual harassment they had endured at work. Another woman disclosed that she had been sexually assaulted while in college and that she was still struggling with symptoms of PTSD. And one person who I had known for years began to regularly open up to me about sexual abuse that had occurred during their childhood. None of these disclosures were the result of prying or prompting. I honestly believe that survivors are just looking for a way to share their story, and I presented myself as somebody who was willing to listen. In a way, my professional experience allowed me to care about this more in my personal life. And in turn, my personal experiences deepened my desire to make this a part of my professional identity. So how do we get more men to care about this important cause? Well, like any other social problem or public health crisis, we do it by making it personal. We do it by making it relatable. We do it by bringing it close to home. In the case of relationship violence and sexual violence, this is an easy thing to do, even if it is a difficult thing to consider. Because relationship violence and sexual violence are already personal. They're already relatable. They're already hitting close to home. The Center for Disease Control has found that in the United States, 1 in 4 women will be abused by a relationship partner. And 1 in 6 women will be the victim of a completed or attempted rape. I know this is a difficult thing to think about, but consider some of the important women in your life, some of the women that you care about. Your partner, your friends, your sisters, your daughters, your mother, your grandmothers. How many women are on this list? Is it more than 4? Is it more than 6? The reality is everybody in this room will have somebody in their life that either has or will be directly impacted by this problem. So earlier I posed the question, how do we engage more men in the prevention of violence against women? My answer to that question is, let's start small. Let's start with day-to-day things. Let's start by making it clear to the women in your life that this is something that you do care about. I think this is an important message regardless of gender, but in my experience, it's something that has been more of a challenge for men. So as I pose these questions, I'm posing them for everyone, but I want the men that are listening to pay especially close attention. Do you feel confident that the women that you care about see you as an ally in the cause to prevent violence against women? When it comes up, how do you talk about rape? When it comes up, how do you talk about domestic violence? When there's a high-profile case in the news or in our popular culture, do you express your opinions about this case? And if so, how do you do it? Do you know what victim blaming is? Do you know what rape myths are? Do you make it an effort to avoid endorsing these ideas? And in the most general of terms, what type of language do you use when you talk about women? What type of language do you use when you talk about gender? And specifically for the men, do you automatically become defensive when you hear discussions related to the violence against women? Do you automatically become defensive when you hear discussions around male privilege? If so, have you ever thought how this comes across to the women that you care about? And lastly, do people look at you and say, this is somebody I can share my story with, without feeling judged or blamed? This is somebody with whom I can share my story and feel confident that they will listen and provide support. Earlier, when I talked about engaging men in this cause, I was not talking about growing the ranks of male researchers and policy experts and clinicians. I believe that engaging men in this fight can begin by encouraging them to be better allies and support systems in the lives of women that they're close to. And what we know is doing this can actually help to prevent violence. When we look at data from the Department of Justice, we see that sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, and domestic violence are among the most underreported crimes in the United States. In fact, for all of these crimes, less than half of instances are reported to the police. Similarly, less than half of these victims seek professional help from a trained victim advocate or mental health professional. Instead, if a victim tells anyone about their abuse or assault, it is usually someone that they are close to, a sibling, a friend, a roommate. So despite the incredible work that's being done in crisis centers and shelters and in psychologists' offices, regular people, non-professionals, people listening to this right now are the first line of defense in helping people to heal in the aftermath of trauma. There's groundbreaking research on this that comes from Dr. Rebecca Campbell. She found that one of the strongest predictors of somebody being able to heal after they've been sexually assaulted is the care that they receive from the first person that they tell. If a victim is cared for and supported, they are less likely to show symptoms of PTSD, and they are more likely to seek professional help or legal counsel. As a culture, we need to broaden this personal level of support. We need to make it clear to all survivors that there are people in their life that care. It should be empowering for us to know that simply by being supportive, we can help to reverse the negative impact of trauma. But providing this type of support not only helps people heal from previous acts of violence, it can actually prevent further victimization. Sadly, one of the best predictors of somebody being sexually assaulted is having a prior history of victimization. Each act of interpersonal violence increases the likelihood of it reoccurring. One factor that powerfully mitigates this cycle is the receiving of proper care and support. If a survivor is cared for, they are less likely to be re-victimized. So if we're able to be present for survivors, we are literally keeping them safer going forward. And one final benefit to this approach is we can actually make our community safer. We would all like to live in a community where every instance of interpersonal violence is reported to the police. But the question should not be, why don't more survivors report? The question should be, what can we do to create an environment where they're more comfortable doing so? Survivors are more likely to report their crime to the police if they feel believed and supported by those who they're close to. Experts agree that the best strategy for increasing reporting rates is not telling a victim that they must go to the police. It is providing them with love and support so they have the strength to do so of their own accord. So to summarize, if we're able to be present in people's lives and provide emotional support, we can decrease the risk that they develop PTSD. We can lower the risk for future victimization. And we can increase the likelihood that they report their assault to the police. Fortunately, you do not have to be a trained psychologist to effectively respond to a disclosure of abuse or assault. Anybody can be a good listener. Anybody can patiently offer support. In general, try to avoid telling a person what they have to do. Try to avoid asking too many questions. Even if it's not your intention, it may appear that you're doubting their story. And try to avoid feeling like it's your job to fix the problem or trying to seek vengeance. Instead, what is suggested is offering some simple words of compassion and encouragement. Some very basic things that I have found to be powerful are saying things like, I am so sorry that this happened to you. I appreciate that you shared this with me. What can I do to help you? One final way that we can all be better allies is simply being aware of local resources that you can share with somebody if need be. If you'd like to learn more about relationship violence or sexual violence, or learn more about how to support others, there are a lot of great resources. If you're listening to this here in New Hampshire, I recommend visiting the website for the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. If you're listening to this outside of New Hampshire, I recommend visiting the website for the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Every survivor of interpersonal violence deserves to have at least one person in their life who is willing to listen and to provide support. Too often it is assumed that this person will be a mother or a sister or a daughter. In my experience, in general, women have done an incredible job of filling this role. But think of how much we're limiting ourselves as a culture by continuing this assumption. So this is a call to action for men to join the ranks, to strengthen our team of allies. For all of the men that are listening, at some point in your life, a woman you care about will be directly impacted by this problem. Are you confident that they will turn to you? Are you confident that they will see you as an ally? Thank you.